This movie begins with Whitney dressed as a warrior in the woods. She holds a bow crossed with an arrow, ready to shoot. Jonah, a young man who Whitney has been in love with almost all her life, is also dressed as a warrior. He hides behind a tree and Whitney releases the arrow from the bow towards his direction. The arrow pierces through the tree and gives Jonah a cut through his face. Instantly, they both have a face-off. Whitney pins him to the ground and after a moment of argument, she kisses him. She hears her name from a distance and is pulled back to reality. It was all a dream. Poppy, Whitney's sister who lies beside her, wakes her up and reminds her that it's prom day. Whitney immediately starts talking about how she enjoyed dry humping a certain guy. Poppy is fed up with her, but Whitney continues to be euphoric about the act. While they're chatting, they hear Whitney's mom talking to Jonah. Whitney wonders why Jonah has come to visit her. Poppy then advises her to head to the sitting room and meet Jonah. Deep down, she likes the idea. Jonah says he's there to ask Whitney to accompany him to prom. Whitney is surprised. How can this be when he still has Willow, his girlfriend? Jonah informs her that he's broken up with Willow, so she has nothing to worry about, as Jonah doesn't think anything would work between himself and Willow. He thinks the only reason they've known each other for that long is solely because of their parents. Jonah says Whitney has been available for him, so it only makes sense for him to do the same. Whitney hasn't planned to attend prom. Jonah doesn't feel she should miss a special night as prom. Poppy, who has been eavesdropping, screams that Whitney would love to attend prom with him. Whitney goes inside with Poppy, and Poppy sorts out her dress. They spend the next few minutes trying out different dresses, till they decide on one. Meanwhile, Jonah is having a chat with Whitney's dad, while Whitney dresses up. She shows up and Jonah is very impressed with her looks. He takes her gently by the arm, and they step out. Now at prom, single students are chatting while couples are on the dance floor. Jonah and Whitney lock hands while Whitney tells him that Willow has been staring at her. She informs Jonah that she's been holding on to something quite important, and she'd love to get it off her chest. Just then, the prom compere announces that the prom's king and queen results are out. This announcement overshadows Whitney's revelation. Jonah and Willow are crowned the new prom king and queen. Willow goes on the stage and Jonah, in excitement, also joins her on stage. After wearing their crowns, Jonah doesn't hold back as she kisses him on the lips. This breaks Whitney's heart. She walks out of the hall slowly, with tears dropping from her eyes. She feels like she was brought to prom to be humiliated. She wishes she had stuck to her initial plan not to attend. As she approaches the door, she slips, and her dress tears. Willow sees her, and mentions that she's wearing a Spanx, and everyone in the hall laughs at her. This further devastates her, and she runs out. Jonah now feels embarrassed for Whitney. Whitney continues her walk of shame back home. The next morning, Mr. Carmichael takes Whitney, Poppy, and Levi, Poppy's fiancé, to play badminton at a club. Whitney is a novice in the sport, so she struggles throughout the game. When they are done, Mr. Carmichael suggests they all head to Poppy's wedding reception venue, but Whitney would rather stay back. Whitney goes to get a drink when a bill catches her eye. As she picks it up to skim through, she notices Jonah now works at the club, so she quickly hides. Jonah sees her still and calls out to her. They exchange pleasantries, and when Jonah tries to explain the incident that happened at prom, Willow walks in. She hugs Jonah, and Jonah immediately switches up the conversation. He tells Whitney that Willow is traveling to Europe for the summer holiday. Willow wants Jonah to excuse her and Whitney so she can pass a message. When Jonah does, Willow reminds Whitney that she's overreaching. She tells Whitney that she should take several back seats when it comes to Jonah. She asserts that Jonah will never look her way, even if she and Jonah stop dating. Willow teases her for a while and walks away, with Whitney constraining herself from doing anything rash. Whitney is home and tables a matter before her family. She wants to go for the embodiment empowerment camp. Poppy kicks against at first because it means that Whitney won't be around for the wedding preparations. Whitney assures that she will be back in time. She states many reasons why she needs the camp. After hearing her reasons, Mr. and Mrs. Carmichael agree. The drive to Camp Lossell is an interesting one. Mr. Carmichael has a conversation with himself, but Whitney isn't listening, fixing her mind instead on what the camp holds for her. Now at the camp, Whitney carries her luggage inside, and she notices Bob, a camp official, sounding a warning that phones must be dropped in a box. Someone challenges Bob and wonders if they're in prison. Bob replies with sarcasm. Willow is the challenger, and the moment Whitney finds out, she moves to leave the camp. She hides in a corner and phones her mom, telling her that she needs to leave the camp immediately. She fabricates reasons why the camp isn't conducive for her, also going on to tell her mom how the camp officials are fitness freaks who would stretch campers out. While she's complaining, Axel walks by and warns her never to let the officials overhear her statements. Her mom advises her to stick to her decision to attend the camp and then hangs up the call. It's the first orientation, and Bob welcomes his partner, the very beautiful and fit Cindy. She comes out playing a basketful, and Whitney immediately knows that she's in for a long ride. Cindy gives her opening speech and tells them what to expect. She tells them not to worry when some of the programs seem exhausting. There's nothing they can't achieve when they set their minds to it. She asks that anyone who she throws the ball at catches it and has to introduce themselves. Everyone does so, and when it gets to Willow's turn, she only asks Cindy, who happens to be her mom, why she's been forced to attend the camp. It's Whitney's turn, and she mentions that she's only in camp to make friends. Camp begins officially. Bob makes them run the length of the field repeatedly, while Willow finds a way to brush her shoulder against Whitney's. Cindy takes them to the dining hall and tells them to eat as much as they want. This both surprises and impresses Whitney. She thought they'd control their meal portions in camp. As Whitney serves her meal, Cindy walks up to her and reveals her delight that Whitney is in camp. Whitney wonders how on earth Cindy knows her. It's from the AP scholarship scheme where Whitney impressed her with distinction. This puts a smile on Whitney's face. Camp might just be fun, seeing she already has someone happy to see her. She heads over to sit with Aspen and Martina. Martina has been telling Aspen how she hopes to get one of the hot guys as her trainer. Whitney tells them that she just graduated from high school. Martina is also a fresh high school graduate, while Aspen is entering her second year in college. The main fitness journey begins. Bob and Cindy ask all campers to pick a map and run the length of the map. Whitney goes first, and when she gets to a point, she meets Axel, who happens to be her personal trainer. Axel gets a tad bit hard on her and tells her to continue running while he runs in front of her, urging her to do better. They get to another point, and Axel tries to make her do a planking exercise, but she can't. He tries to motivate her and helps her position her waist perfectly when Renata, Axel's colleague, walks in. Renata reminds him that all trainees were supposed to have been released. Axel agrees and follows Renata, not bothering to keep their hands to themselves. Later that night, Whitney, Martina, and Aspen are having a chat about their respective trainers. Martina thinks Axel is the hottest one among the trainers, but Whitney isn't having it. Martina then infers that Axel can have her anytime he wants. As they go on about that, Willow passes by, and Whitney, trying to avoid seeing her, covers her face with a book. There is an obvious malice between them. Again, Whitney goes into one of her many dreams. The dreams are a depiction of the book she's reading. Dressed in a warrior's outfit, Whitney finds herself with Axel in a secluded place. She claims ownership of Axel while Axel flaunts his body in a bid to impress her. In no time, there's heavy banging on the window in reality. Both she and Martina then jolt out from their slumber. They begin their routines, with Whitney having a hard time going through them. In one instance, she almost falls as she tries to scale through a cargo net climb. In another instance, she mistakenly releases the heavy object she uses to work out, and it hits Axel directly on the stomach, making Axel groan in pain. The next phase of the day's routine is set. Cindy first encourages them to go out of their comfort zones. In this phase, all campers are to climb a ladder to the top of a utility pole and jump, while they strap themselves in for precaution. Cindy has barely finished her statement when Axel mentions that Whitney goes first. She doesn't hesitate while Martina cheers her up. Whitney begins climbing but pauses and imagines herself as a warrior, just as it is in her dreams. She climbs to the top of the pole and jumps, but can't get her hands on another rope. For a start, this was very incredible. The campers appreciate her courage, and Cindy goes over to her to tell her how amazing she is. This makes Willow a bit sad. She wasn't expecting Whitney to do well and be appreciated by people. Worst case, her mom. Cindy meets Whitney in a room, and Whitney opens up that she hasn't come to the camp for the reason she mentioned earlier. It seems Cindy now takes a liking to Whitney. Cindy opens up to Whitney about why people come to the camp. She states that she aims to help people see themselves better. She then leads Whitney on some breathing techniques. Axel and Renata take them on another drill and ask that they lift themselves over a 12-foot wooden wall demarcation. Willow suggests that the fat people form a group, while the slim ones like herself form another group. This automatically puts Willow and Whitney in opposing groups. The exercise begins. Willow and Whitney stop each other from scaling over the demarcation. This leads to both of them falling to the ground. While Willow and the other students make their way to the dining hall, Axel notices that Whitney might have hurt herself. Axel walks up to her, and after accessing the injured hand, he reveals that Whitney needs first aid. They arrive at Axel's room, and while Whitney sits to be attended to, she sees a book on Axel's table. The exact book she's been reading for a while that shapes her dreams. Axel is impressed that they both read the same book. Whitney then asks Axel who his favorite character is, and he mentions Irabelle. Irabelle is the same warrior character Whitney imagines herself as. Axel mentions that Irabelle is a character who doesn't have much but would never shift grounds. This is the reason he loves the character. Whitney confesses that the character has been her motivation. She says she always channels Irabelle's energy when in tough situations. Axel then takes out the piece of wood lodged in her hand. He wipes the blood off her hand and there's a sudden connection between them. It doesn't last for long as Renata knocks and bursts in. The scene becomes awkward, so Whitney quickly excuses herself. As she leaves, she hears Renata reminding Axel about the camp rules. Trainers can't have a thing with campers. Axel assures her that Whitney is just a nice kid and nothing more. At the dining hall, Whitney sits with her friends when Willow infers that Whitney is a loser. Whitney isn't having any of that, so she takes a cup of chocolate and douses Willow with it. Whitney starts walking back to her seat when Willow throws a fruit at her. Her aim is trash, so it hits Martina instead. Martina doesn't let it slide. She throws a fruit back at Willow and the whole dining hall soon turns into a food fight. The trainers come in and stop them. They angrily tell the campers to clean the hall as soon as possible. Back in their room, Martina tells Whitney about how hot she thinks Axel is. Whitney's body language suggests that she might have a thing for Axel. When Martina presses further, Whitney remarks that Axel isn't even her kind of man. Martina wonders what exactly Whitney means when Axel has a perfect body. Whitney doesn't care about his body. Axel just isn't her type. Martina still wants to know when Whitney would make her move on Axel, but Whitney mentions that Axel and Renata might have a thing going on. Martina already has news about that. She heard from her trainer that Renata and Axel had broken up after Renata cheated on him. Martina encourages Whitney to go ahead and fix Axel's broken heart. This creates an idea in Whitney's head, who then lets out a bright smile. The next morning, the whole team engages in a running exercise when Whitney has a cramp in her leg. Axel makes her halt while the rest of the team keeps running, and then he helps relieve her. While he massages her legs, Whitney brings up the food fight. Axel says he isn't mad at the incident anymore. Having noticed the animosity between her and Willow, Axel brings it to Whitney's notice. Whitney then divulges that she and Willow were schoolmates, but they aren't friends. After a meditation session led by Cindy, where Whitney almost gets bitten by a bug, Axel takes Whitney to another part of the camp. He's prepared a place where Whitney can feel like Irabelle. He hands over a bow and arrow to Whitney. Standing just behind her with his body against her body, he teaches Whitney how to shoot. Even before he finishes his tutoring, Whitney releases the arrow, and it's a perfect shot. Axel is both impressed and challenged. It's now a competition for the both of them, but Whitney beats him hands down. As they walk by the riverbank, Whitney encourages Axel to work harder so he can master the art of wielding the bow and arrow. Jokingly, he thinks Whitney is doing too much and carries her on his arm, pretending he wants to dump her in the river. They stay a while in that position, the emotional connection between them building up. It seems they're about to kiss until Axel snaps them out of the trance. They finish the remainder of the journey, putting distance between each other. Whitney gets back to her room to meet Martina, Aspen, and Nathan. They plan on sneaking out to the dive bar, but Whitney isn't interested in going. Besides, she has no clothes to wear. Martina offers to give her something to wear. She successfully takes Whitney inside and fixes an outfit for her. They quietly tiptoe past Cindy's room and overhear her arguing with Willow. Willow insults Cindy, calling her a retired dumb supermodel, just before Cindy walks in. As the trio tries to sneak away unnoticed, they accidentally make a noise, and Willow catches them outside. Aspen quickly spills their plans and admits she doesn't know how to lie. Leaving the camp is near impossible, so Willow offers to show them the possible route, only if she goes out with them. Whitney doesn't like the idea, but they're put in a corner with Willow about to scream and reveal their plans to Cindy. Whitney gives in, and in no time, they're at the dive bar. They get inside, and Martina uses a fake ID to order shots for herself and her friends. She, Aspen, and Nathan hit the dance floor, leaving Whitney and Willow alone. Willow continues drinking, and Whitney inquires about Jonah. Willow doesn't have any idea she can't access her phone while in camp. They warm up to each other. Willow infers that Cindy holds Whitney in high esteem. Cindy has always thought that Whitney would be a good influence on Willow, and Whitney is impressed hearing that. The two ladies hit the dance floor, and after a while, Whitney takes a break from dancing. As she rests at a corner, Brad walks over to her asking for a dance. Immediately, she spots Axel and Renata, who agree to let the campers be for the night, probably to punish them the next day. Axel's presence makes the dance with Brad uneasy for Whitney. Everyone in the bar gathers for the best part of the night, riding the mechanical bull. People take turns to ride the bull and then fall off. It's Whitney's turn, and as she climbs the bull, Axel's mind can only imagine the sexiness Whitney exudes. Renata notices how far Axel has gone in thoughts and calls him to order. Whitney falls off the bull, and Axel runs to her rescue. The walk back to the camp is a long one, as they all had too much to drink. Martina tells Whitney that Aspen is bisexual and that they shared a moment in the bar. Martina doesn't mind being bisexual too. She in fact likes Aspen, but Aspen already mentioned that she doesn't want anything serious. She doesn't want anything to jeopardize her plans for the coming Olympics. Whitney then urges Martina to tell Aspen exactly how she feels. Martina and Whitney are about to enter their room when Axel asks Whitney to stay behind for a second. Brad had given him a note to pass to Whitney. He passes the note, inferring that he isn't cool with Whitney's picking Brad. He believes Whitney can do better. Whitney concludes that Axel is jealous already, but Axel doesn't mind being jealous. They begin teasing each other, and Axel admits that Whitney should be ready for an intense session the next day. Looking into Axel's eyes, Whitney then asks that he handles her lightly the next day, solely because he likes her. This makes the both of them edgy, before Whitney enters her room. The next morning, the campers engage in their routine run. Axel and Whitney are seated on a tree log, having a chat. He wants to know what Whitney thinks about the camp. Whitney relays she doesn't hate the camp anymore, but it's challenging still. They talk about Irabel, and Whitney concurs that she imagines herself as Irabel to get certain things done. Whitney doesn't want to go on that way. She wants to be herself and still get things done. Axel then tells her to stop imagining herself as Irabel and watch how she'd do things easily. Cindy leads the campers through a meditation exercise. When they're done, she calls Whitney to come over. She offers Whitney a role as a trainer for the next summer. She thinks that Whitney can pull it off considering her personality. Whitney likes the idea and promises to give it a thought. Willow sees Whitney and Cindy having a discussion. After Whitney leaves, Cindy goes over to Willow and hugs her. Axel and Whitney sit beside the beach, having their usual conversation when Renata walks up to them. Renata suggests a game of capture the flag between trainers and campers, and everyone joins in. The game begins and Whitney gets access to the flags, but Axel channels out his competitive nature and brings Whitney down. He apologizes to her, but Whitney understands. Martina and Aspen spend time in Martina's room talking about their feelings for each other. Martina wants to pursue a relationship. She doesn't think goals and aspirations should deter them. She isn't done talking when Aspen kisses her. At that moment, Whitney walks in and Aspen decides to leave. Whitney confesses that she's happy for Martina and then hugs her. Martina looks through the window and sees Axel having a heated conversation with Renata. Martina believes Whitney now has a free pass with Axel. That evening, Whitney runs to the beachside. She takes off all her clothes and dives into the beach for a swim. Axel shows up and joins Whitney unclad too. Axel's necklace falls off, and Whitney begins looking for it. She finds it, and Axel is so excited and hugs her. Their bodies touching each other gives them a soothing feeling. After their swim, they make a bonfire and sit by it. Axel explains that the necklace was his dad's. After his dad's demise, he got into a fight with his mom, and he left the house. He hasn't returned back since then. This was what drove him to become a fitness freak. He says he doesn't like to lose control of things, but with Whitney, it's different. Axel compliments Whitney, and this sets the mood for them. They begin kissing. And midway, Axel mentions that he just left a long-term relationship. Whitney immediately gets turned off by that. She feels Axel would end up using her, seeing that she isn't very beautiful with a banging body. She says some hurtful things to Axel and walks away. The next morning, Whitney doesn't join the rest for breakfast. She's back in her room packing her bags to leave camp. Willow notices Whitney's absence and goes in search of her. She finds her in the camp office retrieving her phone. Willow notices Whitney's frustration and apologizes for all the mean things she has said to her. She tells Whitney to never allow people like herself to determine who she becomes. Willow advises her to enjoy the good things that come to her. Whitney is surprised, but she loves this. She's not sure Axel likes her, but Willow assures her that it's Axel's loss if he doesn't like her enough. The two ladies are now friends. Whitney even admits that she now prefers Willow to Jonah. They end their conversation with Willow telling Whitney that she and Jonah are done for good. Camp Lausel is finally coming to an end. Bob and Cindy give the campers a final speech. Axel then meets Whitney and wishes her well. He tells Whitney that he'd never use her to get someone else jealous. The campers go through their last running routine and everyone goes back to their rooms. Whitney appreciates Martina for having her back, then they share a hug. Whitney then goes over to Axel's room but doesn't find him. Willow walks up to her and offers to pass her message to him. The two ladies bid each other goodbye and Whitney joins her dad in the car. Whitney is home and finds Poppy teary. Poppy's wedding reception venue has been canceled because it's been renovated. Whitney suggests they use their backyard, and Poppy loves the idea. Preparations then begin in earnest. It's Poppy's wedding day, and all friends and family are gathered. Whitney makes a speech and talks about how much positive influence Poppy has on her. With a teary eye, she quotes a piece of advice Axel shared with her. At that moment, Axel walks in. After her speech, Whitney walks up to Axel and apologizes to him for saying mean things to him. Axel hasn't held that against her. He reiterates that he and Renata are not an item. He goes on to express his love for Whitney. Whitney feels the same way, and they both kiss while soft music plays in the background.